Okay, thanks. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asik b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Hariv na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu b'fiyamcha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzenu v'tze'etzeimcha beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah le'emu Yisrael. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol amim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
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 Okay, so Kevin asked a very good question yesterday. Kevin, I hope you're listening to the shir, because this is what you asked. You said, what happens if there's no place to wash your hands in Al Natilat Yadayim? So now say there will be no water, or you're concerned that you're going up mountain passes, you don't have a good sense of direction, or you might, or you don't want to go alone, and you're getting hungry and you can't wait, so you're hypoglycemic. In that case, you can wrap your hand in a cloth or wear gloves and eat like that. In other words, it's not just so simple that you wipe your hands. It's that you actually cover your hands. And I never knew this, guys. So if you can't vas, you've got to eat and not expose your hands to the bread. You've got to cover your hands. Did you know this?
Never heard that. No, never heard that in my life. Thank you so much.
You actually taught me that in Israel, Dames.
I forgot. Are you serious?
No, you showed me that because the one time we were hungry and we couldn't stop. So you had we couldn't touch the bread. Like it was kind of weird.
But it's been so long, I didn't remember showing you that. For me,
you told me that.
It means that I must be getting old. I mean, it's like you watch a movie and you think, oh, this is interesting, and you've watched it before. It's a very frightening sign if I taught you that before and I never remembered. So
you obviously don't do it often enough to actually, all the time.
No,
so
well, I don't get in trouble often enough because the reality is when I have bread, there's always water nearby. We very rarely get into that situation, Arthur, like we were in Israel.
No, well, there was a time when you were hypoglycemic and we were stuck in the. We got the things, and only after we were taking it away. Like we were on the way, and you started feeling weak, and you needed to get something in your body. So
okay, well, it's just as well I learned to halacha then. Okay, I forgot. All right, so guys, that's to answer Kevin's question, and we did the halacha.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Sorry, there was actually a part 2 to the question. I don't think it came across correctly by me yesterday. Is what happens if there is water, but you can't find a container?
So then if you can't use a container, you can't use it because it has to be of the force of your own hands.
Can you not cup your hands and make it into sort of a vessel?
No, because your hands itself are impure. That's why you're vasing it.
So you basically can't vas if you can't find a vessel.
As far as I know, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to find a vessel, because anything that's containing the food, whether it's tin foil or a packet, itself is a vessel. You don't leave sandwiches unexposed, which means...
So sandwiches would be in a plastic thing, so you can make that...
a plastic thing, or it would be in foil with cold meats or something. The way that you cover the sandwiches to keep it away from dirt and dust, you wouldn't just leave it on the seat of your car. That itself can perform as a container.
Okay, perfect. Good answer. Thank you.
All right. Just the pragmatist in me. Okay.
Yeah, no. I like it.
Right.
Thank you.
In terms of how the 72 minutes works and 18 minutes backtrack, I don't know. But I think if you can just derive from here that you cover your hands if you can't vas is enough of a locha that it was worthwhile. So listen, what happened is we were in 11A2 yesterday in Bava Kamma, and we went to 11A3. So I'm just going to do a quick summary. Okay, so the Gemara starts a second rule by Ula in the name of Rav Eliezer. And Ula said in the name of Rav Elazar, if a woman suffered a miscarriage and the amniotic sac emerged partially during the first day and partially during the second day, we count the day of childbirth Tumah from her first day as the counting days of Tumah begin as soon as the amniotic sac begins to emerge. Ula's ruling is questioned. Rabba said to Ula, what is your reasoning? Do you that the woman is tameh from the first day to treat her stringently. But this stringency, that will lead to a leniency. For you will declare her tahor, pure, counting from the first day, and thus she will become tahor a day earlier. Rather, Rava said, as regards being concerned with the possibility that she is tameh, she must indeed be concerned. And we therefore declare her tameh from the first day due to this possibility. But as regards to counting the days of Tumah, we only count them starting from the second day. The Gemara questions Rava's explanation of Ullah's teaching. What is Ullah coming to teach us with this ruling? Does he mean to teach us that even part of the amniotic sac does not emerge without a portion of the remnant of the aborted fetus within it? But we learned this already in a Mishnah, which states, if an amniotic sac emerged partially from an animal before it was slaughtered, the sac is prohibited to be eaten. Because an amniotic sac is a sign of a fetus in a woman, and it's a sign of a fetus in an animal. What does Ullah need to teach us this, which is already stated in the Mishnah? Okay, so that's 11a3. So just hang on a second, guys. I'm just putting my phone on airplane mode. Okay, there we are. It's on airplane mode. And now we're going on 11b1. We're going to come back to it. And in truth, it may be part of an amniotic sac can emerge without any portion of the fetus inside. And the Mishnah therefore forbids eating of the sac when it emerges partially, only because of a decree that it might be mistakenly permitted when the sac emerges totally. And if this is the correct interpretation of that Mishnah, Ullah's ruling cannot be derived therefrom. Ullah therefore teaches us even part of the sac does not emerge without containing some portion of the fetus. Okay, so that's the entire part in the Gemara, but I think it needs some explanation, because if you're reading it just clearly, it doesn't make any sense. Are you with me? Does anybody understand it from just reading it? Because I would be hard-pressed to understand it just from reading it. Do any of you guys understand it? Apart from what we read today.
I read it. Whether I absorbed it is another story. Without making it into a logical thing, put it that way.
Well, that's the essence, Arthur. If you can explain it simply to somebody else that they understand, it means you understood. As Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And that's our motto, that we've got to be able to explain something in simple language to anybody. Otherwise, we don't understand it. So,
yes, Rabbi Einstein.
No, on a serious note, Arthur, you know I've got no sense of direction. You know, in Israel, I'd phone you when I was in trouble. And the reality is, you know a sense of direction, but unless you could explain it to me, you can't make me independent of needing you. So my job as a teacher is make you not need me. That's the sign of a good teacher. If you can give it over and no longer need me, I've done my job. Otherwise, I haven't done my job. So let me just break up a couple of the concepts. We said very clearly yesterday that whether a woman miscarries or gives birth, the halacha of her being tuma, tameh, whether you use the adjective or the noun or the verb, etc., she's in a state of impurity because she's lost that potential of containing life, whether that life actualized into a real birth or whether it resulted in a miscarriage. She's no longer at the same high elevated level because she's not holding life within her. We said that a woman is in a tumor experience for 14 days if she's pregnant with a girl, because her baby, if it's a girl, is going to bring forth life of its own, because her daughter one day will get pregnant and hold life of its own. So therefore she's at a higher level of Kedusha while pregnant with a girl than she is with a boy, because that boy can only give life to someone else, but he cannot contain life in and of itself. So for there, we keep 7 days of impurity of tumor period from the time she gives birth. So when you give birth, it's a pretty easy process. That time that you tumor is that time. We're talking about a case where there's a suffix, there's a doubt because of a fetus in an amniotic sac. But when a woman gives birth, that's the astrological date when the baby comes out of the actual baby. That's the period of time where she's tumor. There's no question there because a fetus is actually emerged. The question comes with regards to miscarriage. with an amniotic sac. So if there's an amniotic sac that contains a clear fetus and you're able to determine the sex of the fetus, again, it's 14 days for if she was pregnant with a girl, even if she miscarried, and 7 days for a boy. If the fetus itself has dissolved within the amniotic sac, she keeps 14 days just to be more stringent in case, as Michael Kupovitz quite rightly said yesterday, which was great logic, in case it was a girl, and you just can't distinguish it from the fetus. So well done, Michael, for that. It makes complete logical sense. Now, the question comes, and why we're repeating it today, because the first time we touched on it, it's a new concept. We had to deal with this. So Rava said to Ulla, there's a problem, because before we state what the problem is, according to his interpretation, we've got to say what the potential problems is. It's one thing if she miscarries on one particular day, if there's a miscarriage. Why? Because then she's given birth even to a stillborn baby or an amniotic sac on that day, and then from that day she's impure, just like a normal birth. Where the difficulty lies with a miscarriage is when she starts to have the miscarriage compared to when she concludes the miscarriage. Again, this is not an issue for the birth, because the birth is only defined as when the baby actually comes out, because you can determine the sex of the baby. Do you remember in those days they didn't have sonar scans or anything else? It was a surprise what came out. So at the point where it came out, that's when you determine the sex and the period of time of tumah. There were no body scans. You couldn't see if it was a boy or a girl. So in this particular case with the miscarriage, what happened is on the end of the first day, just clearly before sunset, it was considered the first day, she started having the miscarriage. And by the time maybe a half an hour or 40 minutes after the sunset, she completed her miscarriage by obviously emerging with an amniotic sac. And in this particular case, we can't determine what the fetus is. In other words, we don't know where the fetus is. We do know that it is in the amniotic sac, because the reality is we learn from the rabbis that there is always a fetus within the amniotic sac, both with humans and animals. It might be dissolved, but it's definitely there. And why could it be dissolved? A woman is considered to having conceived 40 days after pregnancy. So obviously then the fetus is not fully formed. So if on the end of the 40th day she has a miscarriage, she is entitled to keep the laws of tumah for that period of time. We also learned that during a woman's birth, if there's no bleeding that occurs, or during the miscarriage on her side, she's still regarded as in the state of tumah, because it's not like a menstrual period. It's the fact that she lost the potential for life within her own body, even if it results in a good birth. Fine. So what we're saying here is that the premise is that in the amniotic sac, there's always a fetus, even if it is dissolved. And within a very short period of time of just after 40 days, after conception, she is automatically tameh, even if there's no flow of blood. Fine. So now what we're discussing is an issue is...
Can I ask you something? Sorry, Damon. Sorry to interrupt. Why is it 40 days for that, and it's 14 days for a girl and 7 days for a boy? Why is it 14 days?
They're different issues. Let me explain. It's a good question. We're talking about what's considered life. You cannot have an abortion after 40 days. It's considered that the woman contains life. That is a completely separate issue, whether she's considered pregnant compared to once she gives birth or has a miscarriage, the period of time that she's in a state of spiritual impurity, of tumah. They're two separate issues. Once she has given birth and you can determine the sex of it's either boy or girl. It's 14 days for a girl and 7 days if she gave birth to a boy. But that has nothing to do with the issue of conception. She's only deemed to have contained life within her if she's pregnant for more than 40 days. It means she can't abort the fetus. Judaism will not allow abortion unless they're very extenuating circumstances, which is beyond the scope of the shiur. Are you
Okay,
with me,
so
Kabb? They're different issues.
no, I just wanted to understand how long is she tuma after she aborts, after the fetus comes out stillborn. So the fetus comes out stillborn after 9 months.
So, what I said is, if you can discern the sex of the fetus, and the fetus is whether she gives birth or the baby, or it's a miscarriage. Either way, if you can determine the sex of the fetus and it's a boy, it's 7 days. If you can determine the sex of the fetus and it's a girl, it's 14 days. If you cannot determine the sex of the fetus because the fetus was dissolved in the amniotic sac, as Marco said, we go according to the stringent route, as he logically deduced, and we go 14 days in case it's a girl.
Okay, no, sorry, I thought you said 40 days. So the 40 days has to do with
40 days
at the
has
beginning.
to do with conception. That has to do with, is a woman deemed pregnant? So after 40 days, she cannot abort. If she's pregnant before that, it's not considered life, halachically.
So she can have so a Jewish girl, from girl can have an abortion.
Before 40 days, it's not considered an abortion. It's not life.
Even if there's no problem whatsoever.
But I said it's beyond the scope of the shir. It's a halachic
Okay.
You're actually losing time.
All right, sorry, continue.
Is your issue clear though?
Yeah, no, I'm sorted. Thank you.
Okay.
Carry on.
So, Gav, it is a complicated issue. We're just saying that the definition of conception, of containing life, to where you definitely cannot abort, unless it's in danger of the mother, etc., is after 40 days. That's considered whether the neshama has entered the body. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Listen, it was a good question. We just need to go on. I'm not a halachic guy to paskin at all. So,
no problems.
All right. So what we want to say here is that between the end of the first day and the beginning of the second day, it's a short period of time. It's not like she remains in labor for like 20-something hours. In that short period of time, we want to know at what point, and this is only to do with a woman that miscarries, because when a woman gives birth, at that point, when she gives birth, that's the point at which you consider her state of impurity. That's it. It's clear. Has she given birth on that day? That's the day. There's no half days. With the miscarriages, half day. Does that make sense? Guys, I need consensus.
Yeah, got it.
Marco, Arthur?
Yeah.
Marco, you look like you're not sure.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
So it's straightforward. So what happens is the amniotic sac starts to emerge on the first day, and then like a half an hour after sunset, she gives birth to the amniotic sac. You can't determine the sex or whatever. And then we say, let's say that the fetus is dissolved and you can't determine. So therefore, it's 14 days. Now, Rava wants to say, if you start to count from the 14 days to make her impure, why does Ula say in the name of Rav Elazar that it has to count from the day where she starts this process of emitting the amniotic sac? Because he said, in case some of the fetus is contained in that portion of the amniotic sac that is starting to come out of her, that already renders her tameh, impure. And from that day, she cannot touch any vessels or anything else, because that will render it in a state of tumah as well. Does that make sense? So Rava said to Ula that it's a bit of a problem, because if you count from the first day and she releases the majority of her amniotic sac in the second day, partially, and the majority of the fetus is there, then what happens is she's actually pure 1 day early. You're trying to be stringent by making her tameh a day early, which is prudent, but you're going to make her tahor pure 1 day early, because the period of 14 days, the time that you count is going to end on the 1 day early. And then if the majority of the fetus comes out on the second day halachically, or the majority of the amniotic sac, which contains the fetus, she's going to be pure 1 day early, and she's going to end up infecting everything. And if her husband has relationships, there's kares. So that's a problem. So Rava is actually answering Rav Ula. So he poses this question to Rav Ula, and he's answering it on Rav Ula's behalf, because he's saying that basically Rava says Ula is entitled to be concerned with the possibility that she's Tameh. She must be concerned, and therefore we declare her Tameh from the first day due to the possibility. But as regards to counting the Tumah, to be safe, we only start counting from the second day. That way we covered. We absolutely covered. Does that make sense, guys? Do we have the case clear?
Yeah.
100%.
Fine. So the Gemara questions Rava's explanation of Ula's teaching. So what the Gemara does is he's saying, why would Ula need to teach Rav Elazar in this particular case? Because when we learn in a separate Mishnah, because firstly it wants to say, listen, does Rava come to say that Ula means to teach that even part of the amniotic sac does not emerge without a portion of the remnants of the aborted fetus within it? So what it's saying is, if some of the amniotic sac comes out, is it always a case where some of the aborted fetus is within it? Or can it be the part of the amniotic sac that hasn't emerged actually contains the fetus in it? Because we're saying if it's a case where no matter what part of the fetus comes out, what part of the amniotic sac comes out, there's a fetus dissolved within it pretty much evenly throughout. And if the majority comes out, she's considered from the first day. Listen, there's no argument if the majority of the amniotic sac comes out on the first day, that we count according to the majority. But we still only count from the second day to be stringent. So it's when that majority comes out, for sure. So it's the same with childbirth. Does that make sense? When the baby actually comes out, not when it starts, that's when it counts. But with the amniotic sac, we're not sure where the fetus is. Does it start on the first or second? So we're saying that if this is the Gemara's question, what did Ula need to teach Rav Elazar's opinion for? Because we learned in another Mishnah that when we're studying animals, what did we study? We studied clearly that if a calf is born, a calf has to be shechted separate to its mother. If a calf is fully whole and developed and still pregnant within the mother's amniotic sac, and you shecht the mother, you can eat the calf without shechting the calf. Does that make sense? Because it's still contained within the body of the mother, meaning the mother shechting is good enough. It's good enough. Any questions there, guys, before I explain further?
No.
No,
Okay.
No, I'm cool.
Okay, so that's fine. So what it's saying is we learned that a fetus, because an amniotic sign the amniotic sac is a sign of a fetus in an animal, and we learn it's the sign of a fetus in a woman. What do we need Rav Ula to teach Rav Elazar this for? It's already stated there. It's prohibited to be eaten if it emerged partially. Because you could think that maybe if the leg came out of or part of the animal came out, you can have that part of the animal that's still in the mother, but the rest of it you can't have. And I think that is the law, but the rabbis came to put a stringency that says that if part of the animal came out, you can't have it. And part stayed in, you can't have it. There is a stringency, especially if it's in an amniotic sac, because the fetus is within the amniotic sac. So we don't understand what this is coming to teach. So what happens is, before we explain what the rabbis came to determine, we're just going to explain one or two factors quickly. In fact, I actually can explain it on 11b1, just to save a little bit of time. So what the rabbis were nervous of was as follows, is that the Mishnah explains that the reason that the partial emergence of the amniotic sac of an animal renders the entire sac prohibited to be eaten is because that partial emergence signals the definite emergence of the portion of the fetus in an animal, just as it does in a woman. That being the case, we must concern ourselves with the possibility that the majority of the dissolved fetus was contained within part of the sac that emerged. And if the majority of the fetus did emerge, it's considered to have been born. And the result of it, that any part of the amniotic sac cannot be permitted because it's not covered under the slaughter of the mother. It's only if it's within the mother. Now, an animal does something that a human woman doesn't do. What can happen is that most of the amniotic sac can come out, and the mother's womb of an animal can withdraw the entire amniotic sac back, which means that in that case, the animal's halachically defined as born. And in that case, you can't have it as part of the anatomy of the mother that was shechted, in a mother animal, and you would have to shecht the fetus separately. But since the fetus died in and of itself, it renders it unfit for kosher use. Does that make sense? If it came out somehow alive, you could probably shecht it if there's an animal living in there, but you'd have to make a separate shechting. But you can't determine, so the rabbis came to do that as a stringency, so that if they saw the amniotic sac that came out of an animal, they would think that if it went back in the mother, but they didn't notice that it went back in the mother, they would assume that you could automatically have the fetus and the amniotic sac within the mother after you shecht the mother animal. So the rabbis declared it was forbidden. Only if the calf comes out entirely, only if the animal hasn't come out, can the mother shechting cover the fetus of a fully grown animal. Then you don't have to shecht that, and you can have the contents of the animal mother. Does that make sense? Any questions? So it was done as a precautionary measure, but you could never learn that from a human being, because a partial emergence of a fetus does not necessarily come to say that there might be a dissolved fetus within that amniotic sac with a human mother, if a part of the amniotic sac came out, because we might say that the majority of the fetus is in the amniotic sac that hasn't come out. That's the whole issue. Any questions, guys? So that's why Ulla needed to teach Rav Elazar.
No questions. And we got 7 minutes left.
No, it's fine, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay.
7 minutes.
All right. That's fine. We just need to finish this, and then we can go to the next thing. Believe it or not, that's easier.
Okay.
So Chulin, it starts off in 68a, where it discusses a partial animal that comes out, and the law of Chulin 77a with regards to the amniotic sac. So just a couple of things. So it would be possible that the amniotic sac could emerge partially this is with regards to a woman, without any part of the dissolved fetus within it. And then we would not declare a tahor item that the woman touched during the first day tameh, based on the possibility that the majority of the fetus emerged during the first day. So in other words, if the majority of the fetus emerged during the first day in the amniotic sac, it's obviously tameh, because what it's saying is there a double doubt? In other words, is there no fetus at all where the majority of the amniotic sac came out, and is the majority of the fetus in the part of the amniotic sac that came out? So what we rule is as follows with regards to a human female, is that there's always a dissolved fetus in the entire amniotic sac. And since we don't know where the majority of the dissolved fetus is, in the minority portion that comes out of the woman in the first day, if it's a minority part of the amniotic sac, or if the majority comes out on the first day and the minority on the second day, because we don't know what proportion of the dissolved fetus is there, we go on the stringency that whatever she touches is tameh from the first day, but we only count from the second day. And we can't learn it from the Mishnah in Chulin, because the stringency there is that an animal's womb can almost give birth to a fetus and suck it back, where somebody that slaughtered the mother would think that the animal wasn't halachically born and that you didn't have to shecht the baby separately. So in order not to come to that misconclusion, the rabbi said that basically you can't have the amniotic sac, because we've got to assume that a portion came out and was withdrawn in. So that's why you can't learn that from Chulin. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so now
Yeah.
we can be done with that particular part. I know it sounds complicated. Are you sure there's no questions?
No, I'm cool.
Michael, Gavin?
Is this, Damon, is this, are we finished with the pit story? Is this going to somehow come back to all of us?
Okay, I tell you why this it went off on a tangent, because the Gemara works organically. So what happens is we firstly learned of a case where Rav Ulla holds by Rav Elazar, which is the only lone opinion that says we assess for the thief or the borrower, meaning that he can pay the carcass back as a deposit for the initial principal sum, apart from the penalties of what he owes, and then pay the balance. That's for the principal or the compensatory amount. There will be penalties. And the rest of the rabbis say the thief or robber doesn't get that sort of mercy. They have to go to the schlep of selling the carcass, and they must pay full restitution for the principal amount of damage if the animal died within them kidnapping the animal or stealing the animal. So Rav Ulla was a dissenting opinion, and we say while we're on the subject of Rav Ulla teaching Rav Elazar, we are learning 7 different cases where Rav Ulla brought Rav Elazar. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's part of Bava Kamma. So that was the first case. The second case was this woman with the amniotic sac. While we had to learn Rav Ulla from Rav Elazar, and we couldn't use the Mishnah in Chulin because of the fact that a woman doesn't have a womb that almost gives birth and then sucks the fetus and amniotic sac back in. The fact that as a stringency, you can't eat the fetus of an animal in case it was halachically rendered born, and that's why you can't, and you can't derive any law as far as tumah for a human woman is concerned. And that's why we have this full stringent period where we come from the second day and the first day, just in case the majority of the fetus came out on the first day, even if partially the amniotic sac came out. And then we're going to learn tomorrow the third ruling, and then the fourth, and so on for 7. Don't worry, it doesn't carry on past the this particular daf. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, listen, this is complicated. The other ones are a little bit easier. How many minutes do we have?
1 minute, 40 seconds.
Okay, so Marco, it will obviously come back to everything else. It just teaches this, what do you call it, in a bit of an organic way. Is this a little clearer than yesterday or not at all?
No, it's clearer. Good.
No, I understand that.
No. You're doing great.
Okay, so I'm sorry about
well.
this.